Just to check my own basics here. How can I say that? And also when I'm faced with impossible.
Who am I? Like millions of women everywhere, I'm a typist. I'm a housewife, a mother, and I've been a factory worker. For 25 years, I've been involved in revolutionary politics, concentrating on the liberation of women in the US where I grew up, and later in the West Indies and England. I am one of those people who have always listened to women, assuming that what they are is not necessarily what they can be.
I set my clock to alarm at 6 a.m. in the morning, gets up at 6 a.m., do some of my housework, leave home at 8:30 a.m., reach work at 9, finish at 3:30 p.m., reach home about 4:30 p.m. and start the cooking, and the rest of work I do after then until 6 or 7 in the evening for supper.
We work an 8-hour day here. I'm going home now to do some shopping. I don't have dinner lunch. I have a cup of tea if I'm lucky. I come back to work, I do my work. Then I go home and do my housework, get the tea prepared. How on earth?
Working women have two jobs, the one they get paid for and the one they don't, the running of the home.
There's no profession or trade in the world where anyone works as hard as they do, such long hours, and which just for bed and board. I mean, if industry could exploit women the same in factories and that, and produce from females as males do, and in the condition that society imposes upon women, I mean, it's fantastic.
I mean, in a house, you can't expect a man to do the washing. You can't expect him to make beds or anything like that, can you? Hey?
It was my father who used to make the decisions at home, and Mum used to agree, more or less, because he said so.
He was sort of brought up in a different age, really. He doesn't believe that the man should do anything now.
You've both got to share everything. It's no good expecting the woman to do everything. I mean, I didn't want to live like my mum and dad lived. My mum doing everything, my dad doing nothing.
Yeah, I used to say, why don't you just sort of get him to get his own boiled egg in the morning, or why don't you put it on when he comes down? She used to creep around the kitchen and listen, and then she'd get me to go into the hall and listen when he went from the bathroom into the bedroom, and know that from in the bedroom down the stairs, you know, putting his clothes on, that would take about 3 minutes. So she put the egg in the water then, you know. And I used to sort of say to her, what the hell? You know,
mine used to come in at night and hold his feet out with his boots on and grunt. Sometimes he didn't even grunt, and that was a signal for you to take his boots off.
Yes.
Well, I mean, it happens all the time. My father puts his teacup down on the table and just sort of looks. And if you don't catch his eye, then he sort of will make a noise to say that he wants another cup of tea. Yeah, that's right. Yes, just make a noise to indicate that he would please like another cup of tea. But he never says a word.
Yeah.
And when I've questioned this, my mother would say, "Oh, he's done that for years. You won't change him now."
Members of the Peckham Women's Liberation Group. These are the families that shaped them. They reject not only the extreme domination their mothers knew, but all domination by men.
I prefer to think of man as being more dominant of the two. I like to think of the woman as dependent on the man. I think she keeps the femininity that way. Yeah, I think she would definitely lose her if it was the other way around.
When we got married, when I was 21, I really wanted to wear a wedding ring. Before we got married, I used to sit on the tube train coming back from work thinking, oh, it itches, this finger. I can't wait to get that wedding ring on it.
Even I, when I first got married, before I got married, was looking forward to actually catching a man, to actually being married. And this is very important to girls. I mean, the whole conditioning for women to catch a man by the age of 20, if they haven't caught one by the age of 21, they've had it.
When I was 17, 18, 19, all I thought about was getting married and having children. I thought it was going to be the most fantastic thing in the world. You know, it isn't till sort of almost about a year ago, when I first thought of this seriously, that I suddenly realised that what was it that I was sort of dreaming about, because it hasn't come true. You know, I've got married, I've got kids, but the dream life isn't there. You know, it's boring.
The dream life. The myth of fulfillment through marriage and motherhood is shattering to bits. The modern individual, if she is a woman, is cramped and stifled by the institution of the family as we know it.
You have to make the home what your whole life, and if you find that this doesn't fulfill you, then you become sort of very unhappy and guilty that this isn't what you think that this is what you ought to be doing, is fulfilling yourself within the home, and yet nobody seems to understand that if you want to go outside and do something else, that you are unable to, because being a housewife means you stay at home, you have to look after your children all the time, and nobody believes that you should want to do anything else.
Where's those tongs gone? Where did you put them?
What?
Those tongs, because I can't get the washing out.
What tongs?
Those wooden things. Annie, come on, you get that doll under the table.
It's very bad for children to just see the woman doing all this sort of mopping up process all the time. I mean, they must just get the idea that women are for that. And, you know, if the whole thing about kids identifying, you know, especially girls identifying with their mothers is true, which is what the sort of psychologists and that tell us, then it's just sort of awful for them, because I've been fighting against it all my life, my sort of, you know, conditioning from my mother for that, and here I am, you know, I'm still trying to fight against it, but I'm doing this very same thing to my two daughters, here and now.
Go on. Oh, you cow. It really has incense. Go on, and take it over into that corner. Go on, ride it on your track. Look, if you get on the tractor, then you can ride it over and really help, okay? Ride it over into that.
Whatever the children do, however the children behave, becomes back onto you. You are bringing them up. So that I am told, oh, she's too bad-tempered, what have you done to her? He's a bit of a sissy, he cries all the time, what have you done to him? In fact, the father has no relationship with the children, how they behave.
You just criticise.
You're just criticised for the way you do it. They come home in the evening, they expect the house to look as they want it to look. They expect you to look as they want you to look, the children to behave as they want them, but they only say what they want. They do not actually give anything to it except the money.
That as you feel more and more guilty about, you know, not finding housework fulfilling, you begin to take it out on the kids, and it just leads that round and round. I mean, I began to think I'd go berserk if I stayed at home any longer.
I remember reading stories when I was a kid. Admittedly, they were my mother's, but they were called things like the flower of the family and the heart of a friend, about a girl who sacrificed herself for the family. And I remember weeping buckets of tears and thinking, you know, this is how I ought to be. And I think that, you know, there are people, this is still an ideal, this notion of the sacrificing wife, mother, elder daughter, the idea that the scapegoat of the family, if you like, is the woman, and she ought to give up all for it.
The only way our kind of family can survive is for women to be tied to the home. They must deny to themselves that they have needs and capacities clamoring to be fulfilled. Inside each of us, there is a conflict between what we feel we can be and what we feel we are supposed to be.
A woman is supposed to be, well...
Pretty, attractive, passive, comforting, always comforting, gentle, understanding.
Completely understanding.
Yeah, always understanding everything, the problems. Never disagreeing about anything, you know, just...
Yeah, I mean, the times we've heard women say, you know, about their husbands when they've been out, don't you dare disagree with me in public.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. This happens all the time.
Women's Liberation Workshop in London. To redefine ourselves is going to be a long haul. First, women in groups have to expose and articulate how others have defined us, for example, through advertising.
But they're
telling you that you're a failure as a woman if your house isn't clean, or if your little girl's dress isn't as white as the little girl's next door.
It doesn't seem to me to be an exclusively feminine problem. I don't understand really what we're getting at. Everybody in our society is bombarded by stupid advertising, and we all have the same problem of trying to resist it.
I mean,
men are also consumers. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't seem to be relevant to this movement.
Yeah, but look, the advertising people have realised that it's the woman that stays at home and that buys most of the things.
Women are definitely the most important consumers.
They buy the fridges, they buy the tomato soup.
Well, they desire them perhaps, but the men are the ones who are laying out the money. I mean,
but
they also have to be convinced by the use of.
It's the women who are psychologically prey to it. I mean, if a woman is feeling in any sense alienated, depressed, alone, and she walks down the street and she sees thousands of beautiful windows. Full of things. I mean, she's going to be the one, in her kind of isolation and lack of commitment to anything. I mean, even if it's completely subconscious, she's going to be the one who's prey to this kind of eating,
Yeah, like if you're leading a really bored life, you know how you're really down and you say, well, the best thing to cheer me up is to buy a new dress.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, this is consumerism is the perfect out
Change
for the
my
woman.
My next mask.
Yeah,
it
reinforces the whole system.
You got it, Sally?
No, I haven't got it.
Oh. That fantastic quote.
I was reading it Sunday on the phone.
Who was
I
it?
left it on the bed.
Was that fantastic quote? Who
Well, it's a quote from somebody who's a director of motivation research
in America.
Group, and talking about how.
Is it properly manipulated?
Properly. Yeah, this is right.
A woman can be made to feel.
If you're not afraid of that word.
Yeah, properly manipulated. If you're not afraid of that word, women can find something like this, their identity,
and even
the self-realization, even the sexual joy by the buying of things or something.
A woman feels that the situation in which she finds herself is individual to her. If she doesn't make it in her personal life, or her sexual life, as a mother, or as a wife, then it's her fault. One of the functions of the groups is to clarify, first to themselves and then to all of us, that it is the framework of society which constricts and degrades her.
Even the employment advertisements are geared to a woman serving and servicing another man who is her superior.
Yeah, now don't you think one of the most destructive things about it is not only, all right, a lot of women might get fed up when they see these things because they're tired of them, but when one is still feeling isolated, one is still involved in the competition which they instill in one. Even if one says, all right, I don't want to be, a slim-hipped, long-boned, fleshless, brown and blonded creature, which looks so inhuman anyway. Yes, exactly. I don't want to be that, and yet one feels this kind of anger that this is competition. I'm meant to compete with that sexless object, supposedly, And if one does feel isolated, one is still involved in that juggling, this.
And the contrast between these advertisements, which are geared at the single girl, and what I was saying before, and the contrast between these girls and their mums and our mums. We're promised this bed of roses, that all the magazines, all the advertisements, everything is geared towards this fantasy, this little cottage with roses round the door, and happiness forever after. And then you look at your own mum's life, and, what happened to her bed of roses? This is the contrast when you really see what the myth means.
The sanctity of the home is a myth. It is a fancy phrase to paper over the actual lives that people live. Motherhood, like old age, is glorified only so long as there is a pay packet to support it. The Birmingham Claimants Union is a group of women dependent on Social Security payments. They have banded together for survival.
I'm an unsupported mother. I've got 6 children. I can't possibly go to work at the moment. And there must be other women in the same position, and I'm sure they must have been treated in the same manner. Can't you find a job?
These people are desperate, really desperate for money. If they're no husband behind them, no money, they're worried about their next meal for their children, or how they're going to pay the rent, the bills, or their children need clothing or anything like that. They just, as I say, it is to me the last resort. If there was any other way really I could get money rather than live on Social Security, I for one would be off it tomorrow.
You're always told it's government money.
The attitude with the clerk is sometimes, It's as though they're paying you out of your own pocket. You're belittled. You really are. And this, in my, for me, this, I just sort of, I'm afraid I'm rather hot-tempered, and I sort of get at them. And this, of course, angers the clerk, and he does his damnedest to be awkward to me. And I think a lot of people do this.
Some of the questions they fire at you are very, very personal. Now, I am a member of the Birmingham Claimants Union. If I went on my own, I would lose my temper, and I'd let them know it as well. I mean, I wouldn't hold back.
What kind of personal questions?
Well, such as, have you got a boyfriend hidden away somewhere who's keeping you? They don't believe you, there's so many different questions that are put to you.
Yes, well, we had an instance of this. We had a young unsupported mother of about 17 come in here, and before she was in the union, she'd been up to the ministry to try and get her money back. She'd been living off her maternity allowance. She got this young baby, and one of the clerks there, lady clerk there, said to her, how old were you when you first had sex? Have you had sex since the child's born? Where did it take place? Well, she was terribly upset about this sort of thing. We went up, she came down and joined the union, and we went up and represented her at the union. And even then, this old chap was saying, an old clerk, an oldish man, and that was saying to her, well, of course, you've got to sue the father of this. This is a usual thing, they pressurise girls into trying to sue the father of the children. And sort of quoting, he's had his fun, he's got to pay for it. And when I asked him his name, he turned around and said, oh, we're servants of the public, we remain anonymous.
I mean, I, for one, and I think Pat and Pauline would agree with this, resent being told, you must do this with your money, you must do that. To me, it's a form of dictatorship, which I honestly don't feel that the ministry, their clerks or anything else have any right to sort of try to, throw at you.
At the moment, I mean, we just have to battle on with the system as it is and try and help people to get their claims, but the whole idea, I mean, is to remove this system as it is. I mean, we want to see a welfare system, and that where people who have to live off the welfare have partake in running it and have something to say in it.
One of the most important things about the groups of women who are coming together now all over the country, that they're women coming together saying, right, we've had enough. And now we're going to come out and contradict all this stuff which has been pushed down our throats about what we are supposed to be and what we cannot be. And you've only got to look at the figures for mental illness. What is it? 1 in 9 women have in their lives have mental treatment. You have more chance of ending up in a mental hospital than you have of going to a university.
I think the meaning of our coming together and finding out that we all have been bothered by the same thing is not that, oh, well, we all have our individual things, now we can make each other feel better because we all have the same problem. It's that we begin to understand that the cause of the problem is not individual.
To be with other women, have a feeling of solidarity, and
it's
actually
exciting.
a kind of, total revelation. My God, what I've been plaguing myself with for so long is something, much more tangible outside of me, which I don't have to blame myself forever for.
About the group meetings is that we have to talk for ourselves. We have to make the decisions. We are all individually responsible for the group decisions. We are not relying on other people. For the first time, we're really having to do things ourselves. And there are no, it isn't a sort of committee meeting with some people talking and others listening. We are all participating.
We've always been told nothing can be done. We won't accept that. We're not going to waste our energies any longer in noble endurance. We've got to use those energies to create a new society. We can't do it on our own, but we can't leave it to anyone else. This is the Bristol group.
It's probably the families that we've all grown up in have somehow or others convinced us that there is somebody in society who's going to take the place of our fathers and he's going to tell us all what to do. And I think that this is the sort of society that we must get rid of and that has to be sort of broken down, and we can only do this by getting rid of this image of somebody telling us what to do within ourselves. We mustn't look anymore for people to tell us what to do. We've got to work out the answers or ask the questions for ourselves, and not go looking for somebody with all the answers.
But we want answers, surely. I mean, you say let's ask questions, but it's not enough to ask questions, surely. I mean, one starts by asking questions, but I mean, you can ask questions all your life. You need
You need
But
something.
if you talk
Apart
about
from just
giving
quantities.
answers, I mean, what you want to pose is a number of different alternatives so that people can start, thinking that there are alternative ways. Not saying that this is an absolute. Oh no, but you can never give someone an absolute answer.
I think what Janet was saying connects with is the fact that you can't divorce family structure from social, political, economic questions. I mean, it's no good just saying, go home and think about whether you're going to go on living with your husband or whether you'd rather live with 6 other people or whatever. But think in terms of equal pay, equal social benefits, equal legal rights, these sort of things. And only then can you really start thinking, I mean, getting these things is going to alter family structures, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, in getting these things is in many ways perhaps more important because they are much more basic. They underlie everything else.
No, I don't think those things in themselves will alter any family structures. They won't alter anything unless the people in the family are thinking differently from the way that they have been thinking.
Dependence on a man's pay packet. So much seems to hinge on this, but so much else has to be challenged. How to get rid of the idea of man's work and woman's work. How to educate our children so they do not reject us and we grow and develop with them. How to establish a new social morality in every sphere. But before any of this can be done, we've got to clear away the debris of the past.
But the useful idea that it doesn't matter if the man goes off, but it does if the woman does. The woman's got to be faithful in the old-fashioned sense, but not necessarily the man. This isn't so bad. People just say, oh, he's a bit of a lad.
Yes, but perhaps, we don't ask our men to be faithful. Perhaps women don't ask that men should be faithful. They accept the old con thing, that this is their place and this is men's place and we don't want to change it.
They depend on the men.
Yes, precisely. They have to play along with what with what the men want to do in order to, get what they're going to be given.
Well, I think perhaps if people's emotions are secure, and I think you find this in some existing family groups anyway. If you trust the person and you think that they're not going to do something which will deliberately hurt you emotionally, then you are both free to have sexual relationships apart from with each other because you have emotional trust anyway. And it's sort of removed from this jealous question of fidelity, which gets very close to, just possessiveness, almost sort of, I've bought you, I'm going to keep you here.
Yes, it is very much tied up with possession, isn't it? With the idea that in order to love, or the part of loving, is possessing.
Yeah.
And maybe we should change our whole concept of what loving people is. Perhaps loving people is allowing them to live the way they need to live.
I'd rather have her at home all day. It saves a lot of time and rushing about. The housework's done when I get home and I've usually got a meal on the table. It does save a lot, and I think it saves a lot of arguments as well when the wife is at home all day. Don't you feel that way?
I do, definitely. We feel very much that that men should take a full role in bringing up the children and in running the household. What do you feel about that?
I don't agree with that at all.
Tell us why. Tell us why.
A man just can't do it.
Why?
He hasn't got the patience of a woman, the understanding.
Don't you think he should get it? Wouldn't it be better if men were more understanding? Pardon?
No, I like men just the way they are.
Well, we share work. I mean, take now, for instance, we've both come out to do the shopping, but that's as far as it goes. Simply because the shopping is heavy, and I've brought her down in the car. But that's about the only reason. If shopping wasn't so heavy, she would have come on her own.
How much time do you spend with your children?
Well, very little actually, just probably one day per week, which is Sunday.
Don't you think you're missing something?
I am missing something, but who's going to earn the money?
Now, do you go out to work and feel that your wife should stay at home purely because it's economical, or because you think that's the best way to be?
Well, at the moment, with 2 small children, it is the best way to be, I feel.
Even though you're missing your children growing up?
Yes. Can anybody suggest a better way?
Well, that's what women's liberation is trying to figure out.
Yeah.
That's what we're all trying to work out.
I see.
You think it's worthwhile?
No. No.
We asked her what she thought she might lose.
Oh dear, I don't know. I just can't see a man with children all day long. Can you?
I don't think anybody should be with the children all day long.
But why shouldn't he be with the children some of the day and women some of the day too? Perhaps even together. Perhaps even in a neighborhood with all the parents helping with the children.
That's probably a good idea, but you'd have to alter the whole structure of work, for instance, wouldn't you?
That's what we want to do.
To break days up into half days, as far as work goes.
That's one idea.
And that's one of the ideas.
That's one idea. We'll have a lot of ideas. We have to decide what we want first, and then we'll find out how to get it. But we have to first of all decide what we want.
We want to change everything, the way society is. At the moment, everything is geared to possessions. The man possesses his wife, his family, his home. The woman possesses her household gadgets, her children. Everything is surrounded in separate little groups. Everybody lives in separate little groups, and nobody acts with anybody outside these groups. We want people to relate to each other.
When things start moving, when you start sort of feeling that you've got some contacts outside yourself and you're part of something that is moving and changing and you're working for something, then that very change makes other changes happen, so that guides its own path, as it were. It's not just something that you turn this page over because this page is nasty and on the other side it's nice. So there's no sort of cut and dried answer exactly. I mean, people will work things out once they realise that they don't like how they are living, and I don't think anybody does really like how they are living, especially women.
I think that probably many, many new ideas will come from different people altogether who've perhaps never thought. Just think of people who've never even thought of this in their whole lives up till now, and you can take the lid off, and what enormous release there will be when once they can begin to think. We can't conceive of what might begin then to be.
We want to make it clear. We're not concerned about the few women who make it in this society. We're not concerned that there be more members of Parliament who are women. That would be very nice. It may be very useful, but that is now not our concern. We are concerned with redefining politics, and what we mean by politics is people taking hold of their own environment and changing it to suit themselves and not being at the mercy of events. The Ford women signal the beginning, but it's not just an event, it's a movement. These women are South London electrical engineering workers.
If you do a man's job, you should get a man's wage for it. Why not, Mum?
If you're doing a man's job, surely you're entitled to the same payments.
Yeah, but you see, don't forget, we do a man's job on a capstan. I mean, it's not an easy job.
You run a capstan?
That lady over there, this lady does a capstan work. I mean, after all, don't matter whether it's small work or large work, it's still a capstan machine. And it's still heavy work, I think, to my idea, and I still think they're entitled to it.
With cheap labour. And of course, it isn't only a question of equal pay now, it's also equal opportunities. And
Equal pay. At the moment, these two words have to sum up the entire dilemma of the working woman. For example, bringing her child to a baby minder before work at 8, worrying how the younger ones are looked after and what the older ones are doing when she isn't there, doing her shopping in the dinner hour and the housework on the weekends, all in addition to doing hard, boring industrial work. More money won't liberate us from any of this, but we start with equal pay.
Take years before we ever see that because women are not strong enough.
I think it will take time. I think
it will take
changing.
time. It will take
Times are
Yes, at the
changing.
same time.
And I do feel that with women now, the workers, the factory workers now being able for the first time, particularly women, to have a voice in political things and the way that things are working on the floor in the factory. I don't think it will be a matter of years. I think our time is coming now, right now. I think our time is coming now, right now.
You know,
mine used to come in at night and hold his feet out with his boots on and grunt. Sometimes he didn't even grunt, and that was a signal for you to take his boots off.
Yes.
Well, I mean, it happens all the time. My father puts his teacup down on the table and just sort of looks. And if you don't catch his eye, then he sort of will make a noise to say that he wants another cup of tea. Yeah, that's right. Yes, just make a noise to indicate that he would please like another cup of tea. But he never says a word.
Yeah.
And when I've questioned this, my mother would say, "Oh, he's done that for years. You won't change him now."
Members of the Peckham Women's Liberation Group. These are the families that shaped them. They reject not only the extreme domination their mothers knew, but all domination by men.
I prefer to think of at home. And Mum used to agree, more or less, because he said so.
He was sort of brought up in a different age, really. He doesn't believe that a man should do anything now.
You've both got to share everything. It's no good expecting the woman to do everything. I mean, I didn't want to live like my mum and dad lived. My mum doing everything, my dad doing nothing.
Yeah, I used to say, why don't you just sort of get him to get his own boiled egg in the morning, or why don't you put it on when he comes down? She used to creep around the kitchen and listen, and then she'd get me to go into the hall and listen when he went from the bathroom into the bedroom, and know that in the bedroom down the stairs, you know, putting his clothes on, that would take about 3 minutes. So she put the egg in the water then.
Yeah.
You know, and I used to sort of say to her, what the hell?
Just to check my own basics here. I can only say that, and also when I'm faced in the hospital.
Who am I? Like millions of women everywhere, I'm a typist. I'm a housewife, a mother, and I've been a factory worker. For 25 years, I've been involved in revolutionary politics, concentrating on the liberation of women in the US where I grew up, and later in the West Indies and England. I am one of those people who have always listened to women, assuming that what they are is not necessarily what they can be.
I set my clock to alarm at 6 a.m. in the morning, gets up at 6 a.m., do some of my housework, leave home at 8:30 a.m., reach work at 9, finish at 3:30 p.m., reach home about 4:30 p.m. and start the cooking, and the rest of work I do after then until 6 or 7 in the evening for supper.
We work an 8-hour day here. I'm going home now to do some shopping. I don't have dinner lunch. I have a cup of tea if I'm lucky. I come back to work, I do my work. Then I go home and do my housework, get the tea prepared. How on earth?
Working women have two jobs, the one they get paid for and the one they don't, the running of the home.
There's no profession or trade in the world where anyone works as hard as they do, such long hours, and which just for bed and board. I mean, if industry could exploit women the same in factories and that, and produce from females as males do, and in the condition that society imposes upon women, I mean, it's fantastic.
I mean, in a house, you can't expect a man to do the washing. You can't expect him to make beds or anything like that, can you?
It was my father who used to make the decision.